The Draxion 7 sector was a cold, silent stretch of the galaxy, its systems sparsely populated and largely unremarkable. That changed when Equinor was discovered, a planet unlike anything catalogued before. Entirely covered by ocean, its endless waters shimmered with an almost unnatural brilliance, reflecting hues that defied known spectrums. Yet, Equinor was shrouded in fear and superstition. Stories circulated through interstellar networks of ships vanishing without explanation, of storms capable of bending light and sound, and of colossal creatures seen only as fleeting shadows in the deep. To most species in the galaxy, water worlds meant death. They were graveyards, traps waiting to claim the unwary. In the towering halls of the Zirac Imperium's capital, a heated debate erupted. The Council of High Minds, an assembly of the brightest, strategists and scientists, gathered to address a signal emanating from Equinor. The energy readings were unlike anything they had encountered, pulsing with an intensity that seemed to grow stronger with time. "This planet," began Tinari, her voice carrying the slight reverberation common among the Zirac, whose translucent skin rippled like living glass, "is more than an anomaly. It could be the key to technological evolution or catastrophic ruin. But we cannot ignore it." Her proposal was bold. The Zirac, like most advanced civilizations, had long avoided water worlds. Their physiology, built for dry climates and controlled atmospheres, rendered them vulnerable to the unpredictable environments of aquatic planets. But humans, those strange, resilient beings from the third arm of the Milky Way, were different. They thrived in conditions others deemed hostile. They swam in oceans teeming with predators, explored depths where no light penetrated, and turned vast, merciless seas into sources of life and sustenance. The Council hesitated, their multifaceted eyes flickering with doubt. Humans were new to the intergalactic stage, their impulsiveness both admired and feared. But Tinari pressed on. "If there's any species capable of unraveling the mysteries of Equinor, it's them. Let us extend our hand, not in conquest, but in partnership." The humans responded with cautious enthusiasm. A joint expedition was formed, led by Captain Lena Voss. Her reputation preceded her, a formidable explorer with a mind as sharp as her amber eyes. Her demeanor, often described as unyielding, carried an undercurrent of curiosity and a touch of defiance. Her crew was a carefully selected mix of scientists, engineers, and divers, each chosen for their expertise in aquatic environments. They brought with them cutting-edge equipment, submersible suits designed to mimic the luminescent patterns of deep-sea creatures, modular habitat pods capable of withstanding crushing pressures, and mapping drones that resembled glowing jellyfish. As their ship approached Equinor, the crew gathered in the observation deck. The view was mesmerizing. The planet's surface was a swirling canvas of blues and greens, broken only by the occasional flash of light, an electrical storm brewing within the atmosphere. The waters seemed alive, their undulating movements forming patterns too deliberate to be random. "It's almost like it's breathing," murmured Dr. Elara Kin, the team's lead xenobiologist, her voice filled with wonder. Lena's gaze was fixed on the horizon. "Breathe or not, we're diving in, gear up." Their descent into Equinor's atmosphere was smoother than anticipated, though tension hung heavy in the air. The ship's sensors struggled to interpret the planet's conditions. The water was denser than Earth's oceans, its composition laced with unknown minerals. Temperatures fluctuated without warning, creating pockets of extreme cold and heat. And then there were the sounds, a low, resonant hum that seemed to originate from the very depths of the ocean. It wasn't just a noise, it was a vibration, something that resonated in their bones. The initial plunge into the water was surreal. The surface gave way to a kaleidoscope of light and motion. Schools of translucent fish darted past, their bodies shimmering like liquid crystal. Towering structures rose from the seafloor, resembling coral yet composed of something metallic, their surfaces covered in intricate geometric patterns. These structures emitted a faint glow, casting long, shifting shadows. "This is unlike anything we've seen," Elara said, her voice crackling through the comms. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the scanner strapped to her wrist. "These formations, they're growing, not just forming, but actively expanding." Lena nodded, her expression unreadable behind the visor of her suit. "Stay. Alert. This isn't just nature at work." As they ventured deeper, the water grew darker, though it was far from empty. Bioluminescent organisms lit their path, some drifting lazily, others zipping by in bursts of movement. One creature, resembling a massive manta ray with tendrils that trailed like smoke, hovered nearby. Its surface pulsed with patterns that seemed to mirror the vibrations they had been hearing since their descent. "Is it watching us?" muttered Reinhardt, the team's pilot and deep-sea expert. "Feels like it," Lena replied. Her voice was calm, but her grip on the hilt of her harpoon gun tightened. The creature eventually drifted away, but the sense of being observed remained. Hours passed as they navigated the labyrinthine undersea world. Their destination was a point of intense energy identified by their scanners, something buried deep beneath the ocean floor. But the journey was not without its dangers. The waters grew turbulent without warning, currents shifting violently. At one point, they encountered a massive predator, a serpent-like being with scales that refracted light like a prism. It attacked with ferocity, but their suit's camouflage and a few well-aimed flares sent it retreating into the darkness. Finally, they reached their target, an enormous arch-like structure embedded in the seabed. Unlike the other formations, this one was unmistakably artificial. Its surface was smooth, covered in symbols that glowed faintly with an internal light. The energy readings spiked as they approached. Lena floated closer, her breath steady despite the gravity of the moment. She reached out, her gloved hand brushing against the arch's surface. Instantly, the vibrations intensified, and the glowing symbols began to shift, rearranging themselves into patterns that no one could decipher. "What's happening?" Ilara asked, her voice tinged with both awe and fear. "I don't know," Lena admitted, "but whatever it is, it's waking up." The waters around Equinor were an enigma, alive with vibrant colors and unsettling movement. As the human crew began their descent beneath the ocean's surface, their submersible hummed with the low vibrations of an alien world. The craft's reinforced viewing panels revealed a realm unlike anything they had seen before. Faint shafts of sunlight struggled to penetrate the dense, shimmering water, casting fractured rainbows that danced around the vessel. It was beautiful and disorienting all at once. Captain Lena Voss kept her focus on the controls, her fingers tapping against the console as she monitored the instruments. "Keep an eye on those readings," she ordered, her voice steady but laced with tension. "This place isn't going to let us waltz in unchallenged." The team, silent and focused, adjusted their positions. Dr. Ilara Kin, her wide eyes reflecting the ambient glow of their surroundings, studied the growing field of data on her holographic display. "Captain," she said, her voice cutting through the quiet hum of the submersible. "The water density just increased by another 6%. It's like the ocean is adjusting to us." Voss glanced at her. "Adjusting or testing?" Before anyone could respond, the craft jolted slightly. A flicker of movement outside caught their attention. A school of creatures resembling oversized, translucent eels swirled around the vessel, their bodies glowing with faintly pulsating light. Each one had intricate, lattice-like patterns etched into their skin, as though they carried written knowledge in their very flesh. "Fascinating," murmured Dr. Kin, her fingers dancing across her scanner. "These patterns, they're not random. Today it's almost as if—" "Save the theories for later, Doc," interrupted Reinhardt, the pilot, his knuckles white as he gripped the controls. "Something tells me we're not exactly welcome guests here." The creatures lingered for a moment, their glowing forms weaving hypnotically around the craft, before scattering abruptly, vanishing into the depths. The hum in the water grew louder, resonating through the hull of the submersible like a heartbeat. "Whatever's down here knows we're coming," Voss muttered, leaning forward. "Stay sharp." As they descended further, the landscape shifted. Towering structures loomed out of the darkness, massive formations resembling coral reefs, but constructed from a material that glinted like metal. They reached skyward in complex spirals, some emitting a faint bioluminescent glow that illuminated the surrounding waters. The formations seemed alive, their surfaces shifting and pulsating with a rhythm that matched the vibrations they had been hearing since entering the planet's oceans. "This isn't just geological activity," Kin whispered, her awe evident. "These structures are growing, expanding." Voss nodded, her jaw tight. "And they're leading us somewhere." The submersible's instruments began to register an energy spike. It was faint at first, but with each passing minute, the signal grew stronger, more concentrated. The source seemed to be drawing them deeper into a trench that yawned before them like an abyss. The walls of the trench were lined with the same metallic coral, now glowing brighter, their light shifting through shades of green and gold. "Looks like an invitation," Hart quipped, though his voice lacked its usual bravado. His unease was palpable. They descended into the trench, the craft's lights piercing the dark waters. Shadows moved at the edge of their vision. Large, slow-moving shapes that disappeared the moment they tried to focus on them. The tension inside the submersible was thick, every creak of the hull amplifying their unease. Suddenly, the trench opened into a vast, cavernous space. The water here was eerily calm, the turbulence of the upper layers replaced by an almost oppressive stillness. At the center of the space was the source of the energy signal, an enormous arch-like structure that stood on the seafloor, partially buried in sediment. Its surface was smooth and black, shimmering faintly as if coated in liquid glass. Intricate symbols covered the arch, glowing faintly in the dim light. "That's it," Kin said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The energy readings are coming directly from that structure." Voss didn't respond immediately. Her gaze was fixed on the arch, her mind racing with possibilities. "Hart, hold position here. Everyone else, suit up." The team donned their submersible suits, the advanced technology allowing them to move with agility despite the crushing pressures outside. The suit's built-in lights cast a soft glow as the team exited the craft, their movements deliberate and cautious. As they approached the arch, the vibrations in the water intensified. It wasn't just a sound, it was a feeling, resonating through their bodies. The symbols on the structure began to shift, rearranging themselves into patterns that seemed almost deliberate, almost alive. Kin stepped closer, her scanner buzzing with activity. "It's responding to us," she said, her voice a mix of excitement and trepidation. "It's trying to communicate." "Communicate how?" Voss asked, her tone sharp. "I don't know yet," Kin admitted, her fingers flying over her controls. "But this isn't just some ancient ruin. It's active, and it's aware." Before anyone could react further, the vibrations reached a crescendo. The symbols on the arch flared brightly, illuminating the entire cavern with a radiant, shifting light. The water around them seemed to ripple in response, the calm giving way to a slow, deliberate current that pulled them closer to the structure. "Captain," Hart's voice crackled over the comms, panic evident. "We've got movement out. Here, big movement." Voss turned back toward the submersible, her heart pounding. In the distance, the shadows they had glimpsed earlier began to emerge. Massive forms, their shapes indistinct but undeniably alive, moved through the water with a predatory grace. They circled the cavern, their sheer size dwarfing the human crew. "We're out of time," Voss said, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around them. "Kin, figure out what this thing wants, fast." Kin's eyes darted between her scanner and the glowing symbols on the arch. "I think it's scanning us," she said. "It's trying to understand us." "Well, let's hope it likes what it finds," Voss replied, gripping her harpoon gun as the massive creatures drew closer. The moment the creatures broke through the dim waters, the air inside the submersible turned heavy with tension. Their forms became clearer as they approached, revealing sleek, sinuous bodies that moved with a terrifying elegance. Each one was at least 3 times the size of the submersible itself, their outer surfaces shimmering like liquid metal, reflecting the glow of the alien arch behind the human crew. Long, undulating fins ran the length of their bodies, pulsing faintly with bioluminescent patterns. But what drew the crew's attention most were their eyes, enormous glowing orbs that seemed to pierce through the water with intelligence and purpose. "Captain," Reinhardt's voice crackled over the comms, barely masking his panic. "We've got 5 of those things circling us now. They're closing in fast." Lena Voss adjusted the grip on her harpoon gun, her eyes scanning. the murky water for any signs of a direct attack. Hold your position, Hart. Don't make any sudden moves. Let them come to us. The creatures didn't attack immediately. Instead, they seemed to be assessing the humans, their movements methodical and deliberate. One of them came so close to the submersible that its massive reflective body nearly filled the viewing panel. Its eye lingered on the craft, glowing, faintly with an eerie golden hue. Dr. Elara Kin, now standing at the edge of the submerged arch, glanced back nervously at the towering creature. "Captain," she called through the comms, her voice trembling, "these things aren't behaving like predators. They're watching us, studying us." "Maybe they're waiting for us to make the wrong move," Voss replied, her voice steady despite the unease spreading through the team. "Kin, what's happening with the arch? Is it still responding to us?" Kin turned her focus back to the glowing structure. The symbols had shifted again, forming intricate concentric patterns that pulsed in rhythm with the vibrations in the water. Her scanner buzzed with activity, displaying data that made no sense. Energy levels spiked and fluctuated erratically, as though the structure itself was alive and struggling to communicate. "It's still active," Kin said, her voice low, "but I think it's scanning us, these patterns. It's like it's trying to decode who we are." Voss's brow furrowed. "Decode us? Why?" Before Kin could respond, the vibrations in the water intensified, becoming almost deafening. The arch began to glow brighter, casting long beams of light through the cavern. The currents shifted, pulling the humans closer to the structure, while the massive creatures circling them suddenly halted. They floated motionless, their glowing eyes locked on the arch as though they, too, were waiting for something to happen. Then it did. The water around the arch began to ripple violently, distorting the light and casting fragmented shadows across the cavern walls. The glowing symbols expanded outward, projecting holographic patterns into the surrounding space. These patterns were not random. They moved with precision, rearranging themselves into forms that resembled constellations, geometric designs, and finally symbols that looked eerily similar to ancient human languages. "What the hell is that?" Hart's voice came through the comms, his usual bravado replaced by awe. "Is it talking to us?" Kin's heart raced as she tried to decipher the patterns. "It's not just talking," she murmured. "It's showing us something. Memories, maybe, or knowledge?" One of the holographic symbols floated closer to Kin, its light flickering softly. She reached out instinctively, her gloved hand passing through it. As she did, a sudden wave of images flooded her mind. Vast oceans teeming with life, towering civilizations rising from the water, and a planet alive with energy. It was as if Equinor itself was sharing its history. But the images turned darker. She saw destruction, machines tearing through the ocean floor, waves of fire consuming aquatic cities, and the planet's once thriving life forms being reduced to ashes. The final image was of the massive creatures now surrounding them, their glowing eyes filled with desperation as they fought to protect their world. Kin stumbled backward, her breathing ragged. "Captain," she gasped, "this planet, it's alive, and it's been attacked before." Voss's jaw tightened. "Attacked? By who?" "I don't know," Kin admitted. "But these creatures," she gestured toward the towering forms in the water, "they're its guardians. They're not trying to hurt us. They're here to protect the planet." The arch's vibrations grew stronger, its light pulsating, in sync with the glowing patterns on the creatures' bodies. It was as though the planet and its guardians were communicating directly through the structure. Voss stepped closer to the arch, her harpoon gun still in hand, and stared at the holographic symbols floating before her. "If this planet is alive," she said, her voice calm but firm, "then it knows why we're here. Kin, can it tell us what it wants?" Kin hesitated, her hands trembling as she analyzed the data streaming from her scanner. "I think it already is," she said. "The energy spikes, the symbols, the creatures, it's all connected. This planet is trying to decide if we're a threat. Then we need to convince it we're not," Voss replied, her tone resolute. "Hart, hold position and stay alert. If those creatures make any aggressive moves, be ready to defend yourselves. Kin, keep working on that scanner. We need answers, and we need them now." The holographic symbols began to shift again, this time forming what looked like a map, a three-dimensional representation of Equinor's oceans. At its center was a glowing point of light, far below their current position. Kin studied it, her brow furrowed in concentration. "There's something deeper," she said. "Another energy source, even stronger than this one. It's central to the planet's existence. Whatever it is, the Arch wants us to find it." Voss's eyes narrowed as she processed the information. The massive creatures circling them had begun to move again, their glowing eyes fixed on the humans. But their movements were different now, less predatory, more deliberate. One of them swam closer to the Arch, its bioluminescent patterns pulsing in perfect harmony with the glowing symbols. "It's leading us," Kin realized, her voice barely above a whisper. "They want us to follow them." Voss tightened her grip on her harpoon gun and nodded. "Then we follow. Hart, prepare the submersible. We're going deeper." The currents began to shift once more, pulling the humans and their craft into a slow, deliberate descent. The Arch's light dimmed as they moved away, its symbols fading into darkness, but the creatures remained close, their glowing forms guiding the way. The deeper they went, the darker the water became, until even the faint bioluminescence of the creatures was swallowed by the abyss. Only the distant glow of the energy source below remained, a beacon drawing them into the unknown. The descent seemed endless. The submersible groaned softly under the increasing pressure as it was carried deeper into the abyss. The water had grown unnervingly dark, with only the faint glow of the energy source far below serving as a guide. Around them, the creatures swam in near silence, their massive forms cutting through the darkness like phantoms. Their bioluminescent patterns had dimmed, now pulsing faintly in synchronization with the rhythmic vibrations in the water. Inside the submersible, the atmosphere was tense. Hart adjusted the controls constantly, his usual calm demeanor replaced by sharp, focused movements. Dr. Ilara Kin stared at her scanner, its readings becoming increasingly chaotic the further they went. And Captain Lena Voss stood near the observation window, her harpoon gun held loosely in one hand, her sharp amber eyes fixed on the glowing beacon below. "This is deeper than we anticipated," Hart muttered, breaking the silence. His voice was steady, but the tightness in his tone betrayed his unease. "The pressure here is reaching levels we weren't fully calibrated for. If we go much deeper, this thing might not hold." "It'll hold," Voss said firmly, though she didn't look away from the window. "Keep us steady. We're not turning back." Kin glanced up from her scanner, her brow furrowed. "The energy source is emitting something new. It's not just a signal anymore, it's some kind of wave, almost like a heartbeat." "What do you mean?" Voss asked, turning to face her. Kin hesitated, searching for the right words. "It's alive, Captain. This isn't just an energy source, it's connected to the planet itself. I think it is the planet, or at the very least, its core." Before Voss could respond, the submersible gave a sudden, violent lurch. The Maju lights inside flickered, and warning signals flashed across the control panels. Hart cursed under his breath, gripping the controls tightly to stabilize the vessel. "Something's interfering with the systems," he said, his voice rising slightly. "I've lost partial control of the thrusters. We're being pulled faster now." "Pulled," Voss repeated, her tone sharp. She turned back toward the observation window, scanning the darkness. The current had indeed shifted, growing stronger, more purposeful. It was as if the water itself had decided their course. Outside, the creatures continued to swim alongside, them unaffected by the increasing speed. Their glowing eyes remained fixed ahead, and their bioluminescent patterns brightened slightly, as if in anticipation. One of them, the largest, swam closer to the submersible, its enormous eye peering directly into the observation window. For a moment, Voss could swear it was trying to communicate, its gaze filled with an intelligence that was both unsettling and mesmerizing. And then suddenly the darkness broke. The submersible emerged into a vast underwater chamber, illuminated by an overwhelming golden light. The source was a massive, pulsating sphere of energy, suspended at the center of the cavern. It was enormous, easily dwarfing the submersible and the creatures that had escorted them. The sphere pulsed with life, its surface shifting and rippling like a living organism. Surrounding it were hundreds of smaller structures, pillars, arches, and spires made of the same metallic coral they had seen earlier, all glowing faintly in response to the sphere. "My God," Kin whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's beautiful." Hart let out a low whistle, his hands still gripping the controls. "What the hell is that thing?" Voss didn't answer immediately. She was transfixed by the sight, her mind racing to make sense of what she was seeing. The sphere wasn't just emitting energy, it was radiating something far more profound. It felt sentient. A presence filled the chamber, heavy and all-encompassing, pressing against their minds like an invisible tide. "We're not alone," Voss said finally, her voice low. "This isn't just a power source. It's alive." As if responding to her words, the sphere brightened, sending out a wave of light that passed through the submersible and its crew. It wasn't just light, it was a sensation, a flood of emotions and images that invaded their minds. Voss stumbled slightly, gripping the edge of the console for support. Kin gasped, her eyes wide with wonder and fear, while Hart let out a sharp exhale, his face pale. The images came in rapid succession, Equinor as it once was, a thriving, aquatic world filled with vibrant life and advanced civilizations. The sphere was the heart of the planet, a nexus of energy that connected everything. The creatures that had guided them here were its protectors, bound to its will. But then came the destruction, machines descending from above, tearing into the oceans and draining the planet's life force. The sphere had fought back, unleashing storms and creating barriers to protect itself, but the damage had already been done. Equinor had been left weakened, its ecosystems in ruins. When the images faded, Voss took a shaky breath. "It's showing us what happened," she said, her voice heavy. "What was done to it?" Kin nodded, still clutching her scanner. "And I think it's trying to warn us. Those machines, they're not gone. Whatever attacked this planet before could come back." Hart frowned, his hands tightening on the controls. "So what does it want from us? Why bring us here?" As if in answer, the sphere pulsed again, brighter this time. The vibrations in the water grew stronger, almost deafening, and the submersible's systems began to flicker erratically. The creatures outside moved closer to the sphere, their bioluminescent patterns glowing in perfect harmony with its light. It was clear they were a part of this process. Whatever was happening, they were key to it. "We need to get out of here," Hart said, his voice urgent. "This thing is unstable. If it goes off—" "It's not unstable," Kin interrupted. Her eyes locked on the sphere. "It's activating. It's reaching out." "Reaching out for what?" Voss asked, stepping closer to the observation window. Kin turned to her, her expression a mixture of fear and awe. "For help. It's calling for help." Before Voss could respond, the sphere emitted a final, blinding pulse of light. The entire cavern was engulfed in its radiance, and the submersible's systems shut down completely. For a brief, terrifying moment, there was only silence and light, an overwhelming presence pressing against them from all sides. Then, as suddenly as it began, the light faded, and the submersible's systems flickered back to life. But something had changed. The energy readings on Kin's scanner were off the charts, far beyond anything they had encountered before. The Boam sphere was still glowing, but its light was softer now, more stable. And the creatures, they had turned their attention to the humans, their glowing eyes filled with an almost expectant expression. "It's done something," Kin said, her voice trembling. "It's chosen us. We're part of this now." Voss stared at the sphere, her jaw clenched. Whatever Equinor wanted, it was far from over. The sphere had made its move, and now it was their turn to act. The submersible floated in a tense silence, the faint hum of its systems barely audible over the rhythmic vibrations pulsing through the water. The massive creatures surrounded them in a loose circle, their bioluminescent patterns glowing brighter, more intricate. The sphere at the center of the cavern continued to pulse, its golden light steady but filled with an unmistakable sense of urgency. The humans knew they had been chosen for something monumental, though the weight of that choice pressed heavily on each of them. "What now?" Hart asked, his voice breaking the silence. His hands hovered over the controls. but he didn't move. "If this thing chose us, what are we supposed to do about it?" Voss didn't answer immediately. Her amber eyes were fixed on the sphere, her mind racing. The images it had shown them, the destruction, the guardians, the machines, hadn't just been a history lesson. They had been a warning. Equinor wasn't simply reaching out for help. It was preparing for something. And now they were a part of it. "Kin," Voss said finally, her voice steady. "What's the sphere telling us now? Are there more readings?" Kin was already scanning, her fingers trembling as they moved across her console. The holographic display flickered with streams of incomprehensible data, and her brow furrowed as she tried to make sense of it. "The energy is stabilizing," she said. "It's like the sphere is waiting for input, like it's connected to us now, and it's waiting for us to act." "Act how?" Hart asked, a note of frustration creeping into his tone. "What are we supposed to do? Talk to it?" "Maybe," Kin said, her voice thoughtful. "Or maybe it's looking for something deeper than words. It might be testing us, seeing if we're willing to go further." Voss turned toward the rest of the crew. "We've come this far. We're not leaving without answers." She gestured toward the suits. "Gear up. We're going outside." Hart opened his mouth to protest, but stopped himself. He knew better than to argue with Voss when she'd made up her mind. Grumbling under his breath, he started powering down non-essential systems while Kin and Voss suited up. Moments later, they exited the submersible, their lights piercing the golden haze of the cavern. The water was warmer here, almost comforting. As if the planet itself welcomed them, the sphere's pulsations became slower, more deliberate as the humans approached. The creatures around them remained still, their glowing eyes following every movement. It was as if the entire cavern held its breath, waiting. Voss took the lead, her harpoon gun strapped to her back. She approached the sphere cautiously, her heart pounding as the vibrations intensified with each step. When she was within a few meters of its surface, she stopped. The sphere's light shifted, growing softer, almost inviting. "What now?" Kin asked, her voice hushed. "I think it wants us to touch it," Voss said, her voice steady despite the uncertainty of her words. "Touch it?" Hart's voice came through the comms, incredulous. "Are you out of your mind? That thing could fry you or worse." "Do you have a better idea?" Voss shot back, her tone sharp. She turned back toward the sphere. "This is why it brought us here. We've seen what it can do. If it wanted to hurt us, it would have done it already." Kin hesitated but nodded. "She's right. This isn't an attack, it's an invitation." Taking a deep breath, Voss reached out her hand. Her glove barely grazed the sphere's surface when a surge of energy shot through her body. She gasped but didn't pull away. Her mind suddenly filled with a flood of sensations, light, sound, emotions, and memories that weren't her own. She saw Equinor as it was meant to be, a thriving, interconnected world, with its oceans teeming, with life and its guardians protecting its balance. The sphere wasn't just the planet's core, it was its consciousness, its will. It communicated through energy, binding all life to itself in harmony. But then came the invaders. The machines were unlike anything she had ever seen. Vast constructs that stripped oceans bare, harvesting energy and leaving only desolation in their wake. The images shifted, and she saw something new: humanity. Equinor had observed them from afar, watching as they adapted to their own planet's challenges. It had seen their resilience, their ability to thrive where others would falter. And it had seen their potential for both creation and destruction. The flood of visions ended as abruptly as it began. Voss stumbled back, her breathing heavy. Kin caught her arm, steadying her. "What did you see?" Kin asked, her voice urgent. It's choosing us because it believes we're different," Voss said, her voice shaking slightly. "It thinks we can help it fight back. But it's not just asking for help, it's offering something in return." "What kind of something?" Hart asked warily. Voss turned to face the sphere again. "A connection, a bond. It wants to share its power with us, but only if we're willing to accept the responsibility." Kin stared at the sphere, her expression a mix of awe and fear. "It's asking us to become part of it, to defend it." Before anyone could respond, the sphere pulsed again, brighter this time. The vibrations became overwhelming, resonating through the water and their very bones. The creatures around them moved closer, their bioluminescent patterns shifting into something new, symbols that mirrored the ones the sphere had projected earlier. It's giving us a choice, Kin realized, but we have to decide now. Voss glanced at her team, her jaw clenched. The weight of the moment was crushing, but the choice was clear. We didn't come this far to back out now. We accept. As if in response, the sphere flared with light, enveloping them in a wave of energy. For a brief, blinding moment, the humans felt their consciousness expand, their senses merging with something vast and ancient. And then, just as suddenly, the light dimmed, and the cavern returned to its golden glow. But something had changed. The humans could feel it, the connection. The sphere's presence was now a part of them, its power flowing through their minds and bodies. They were no longer just explorers, they were guardians bound to Equinor's will. The creatures swam closer, their glowing eyes filled with approval. The sphere pulsed gently, its light steady and calm. It had chosen its champions, and the battle for Equinor's survival was about to begin.